Well, you probably don't care, but this is like the 5th time I'm trying to edit this video. My computer's crashed, and oddly enough, I'm speaking on a microphone right now, so it's going to be mostly a voiceover video. There's actually a couple clips in the middle where I forgot to turn the microphone on, so it actually recorded through the GoPro. But what happened was the wires on my microphone got switched around somehow, and it got put on the mic inline, so there's no audio for most of this video. I'll just voice over it because this is a pretty important video that's been waited on. We looked at this vehicle a few weeks ago, and there was a girl she's one of my very first customers when I moved out here. She bought this car. She was driving a real old Mazda 𝘮𝑒𝑔𝐸, and she's going to school, and she saved up finally to buy herself a quote-unquote nice car, but she didn't get an inspection on it. I'm not sure if I would have recommended this one. It's high mileage, and it was pretty expensive, but she bought it private sale. She didn't buy it from a used car lot or anything, so no guarantee, and 3 days later, she found out it was overheating. Here I've got the radiator cap in my hand, so what I'm going to do is just replace the radiator cap. I was going to get a pressure test kit. This one honestly looks fine. I don't expect that to be the issue, but rather than buy the pressure test kit now, I just bought a $14 radiator. Speaking of which, this video is really supported and made possible by the channel members and those people who donated to help do this video. I was going to donate all the parts and labor myself because the girl at this point was just going to give up on the vehicle and send it to the junkyard, and I felt like it was a little bit weird how the diagnosis came about. So I decided, you know what, let me just donate my time and some parts to this and see if I can get it to not overheat and, you know, see if it's not a head gasket. It just seemed a little bit weird the way the diagnosis came about, and I'll explain that here in just a second. Alright, so especially this video is made possible by those people who donated. Consider donating yourself if you find them entertaining or helpful. It really helps me. I'm going to school full time. I've got 2 kids and trying to do this in all my free time, so I don't get to spend much time at home with my kids or filming videos, editing. So, you know, if you want to do that and it becomes sustainable, you know, I'll be able to pump out these videos even more. But again, if you can't do that, no pressure. A subscribe means a ton to me. Here we're going to look at the oil. This was something I left out of the last video, but did look at. The oil looks awesome. There's no water in it, so that was another reason I thought maybe it wasn't a head gasket. You can see there, this looks like awesome, good quality oil. By good quality, I mean low life. And in the case of oil, if you haven't maintained your oil regularly, even a new oil change isn't going to look like that. It's still going to get real dark. So that's a good sign that the vehicle was taken care of a little bit. And I'll show you the cap here in just a minute. We're looking for any sort of gunk or milkshake that happens when you get water in that oil and it gets emulsified by the engine. Here's the cap, no recessed area, but looks awesome. The crankcase looks awesome as well. I'll pull up the camera up here in a second and show you. Here we go. You can't really see in there, but there's no gunk or any sort of buildup in there. Everything looks really clean for the engine. It has 250,000 miles, 215,000 miles. So, looks good. Just talking about how we went about the diagnosis last time, getting everything ready. We're going to replace that radiator cap I mentioned. We're going to do the thermostat, and if it is a water pump, it's actually timing chain driven, so that's going to get quite intense if we go down to that, but I'm guessing that there's air in the system. It's pretty common on these engines. It will cause overheating. This one overheated while it was at idle. When you were driving, it was fine, but the radiator fans worked fine. I kind of didn't explain that very well in the last video. We will take a look at it. However, I didn't show the camera on the fans, so you could only hear it, and again with the microphone, you're not really going to be able to see that, but the cooling fans work just awesome. I use the bidirectional controls on my scan tool to turn them in low, medium, high, and no idea what I said there, but obviously it was a secret. We're just going to go ahead and start tearing in the system. I'm going to jack it up, because to get the air out of the system, you really have to jack it up. We're going to make sure we put the right amount of coolant in there, and we're going to go ahead and just drain out that old coolant right now. So it would be, you know, one thing to go ahead and try and bleed it now, but I have this thermostat and radiator cap. I want to replace it for them anyway, so rather than deal with all that, we're just going to drain it out and do it all at once at the end. Now, we're really going to get into the job here, but I need to explain one more thing before we continue. Check out the original video here if you haven't seen it, but we did the diagnosis on it. What happened was I just had surgery on my nose so I could breathe better. And the girl called me, she, again, one of my very first customers, and she said, hey, my car's overheating in town, can you come help? It was like the day after, or the day or two after, and I said no, and this is just the thermostat, the new thermostat we're looking at here. I said I couldn't because I just had surgery. You can't even bend over because of the pressure and your, you know, builds up in your head. And she sent me a picture of the front of her engine because I thought maybe it was the water pump, so I said, hey, maybe your belt came off, and it was really dark, and I thought there wasn't a belt on there, so I actually went over there. And I thought, well, I could probably put a belt on there. It turns out there was a belt on there. It doesn't even matter anyways. It's timing chain driven. I didn't know that at the time. But then I thought, okay, this is weird, but I can't do anything else, or couldn't do anything else. So I said, well, there's a shop just down the road. Take it there and see if they can do a diagnosis. I can fix it in a couple weeks, or they can do it if you need it, you know, tomorrow. So the day or two later, she hadn't said anything, and I asked, I said, hey, what was the diagnosis? And she said, they said I need a new engine. And I was like, no way. So they said there was exhaust gases in the coolant, which is what happens when you blow a head gasket. So they said she needed new head gaskets. It was going to cost $3,500. And then the way that the information kind of came about, everything seemed a little bit weird, and that's why we went over there last time and tried to confirm a blown head gasket, because it just seemed a little bit weird. You know, it was a private party sale, so it could have been they were just trying to dump the car on somebody, and it would be unfortunate. So I said, well, let me, last time I didn't charge her, I said, let me just confirm, and I couldn't confirm that it was a head gasket. I also couldn't confirm that it wasn't, so that's what we're doing here. I actually brought it over to my house and said, well, I've got a few spare times in the afternoon. I can look at it over the past couple of weeks. I've been looking at it on and off every few days, and I've got down to this point, so we were just going to walk through the diagnosis, but I'll just kind of talk you through it now. I was talking about right here that gases will come up into the reservoir sometimes, and you can actually see residue in there sometimes. That was pretty clean, and I didn't see any fluid in there. We checked the little hose going to that overflow. It wasn't stopped up at all, but it was really short, about 6 inches. So we're going to go ahead, drain it here, jack it up, get everything going, and replace that thermostat, which actually ended up taking quite a bit of time, and just double check everything and bleed the system. I could have done it quickly, but I kind of just wanted to make a thorough video here and get it taken care of, and it went pretty well, so here we go. Alright, so we're just going to go ahead and take the cover off the engine here. I'm not going to do any more compression testing on this. Last time in the video I didn't mention that it didn't smell like coolant in the exhaust. I said there was not white smoke, which would be a lot of coolant, but it also did not smell like coolant. I did go back there and smell the exhaust. It didn't smell like coolant, so we're not going to do any more with compression today or at this moment. We're just going to go ahead and dig into this cooling system, take that cover off there just to get a good look at everything. Alright, right here I'm just draining the coolant, so I think I was actually just checking everything out under here. We are going to do an inspection and look for any sort of coolant coming out of those head gaskets and any other sort of inspection. Alright, I know I mentioned that you have to get the front of these vehicles up very high to get the air out of the system, so we just went ahead and jacked it up here while I'm under there. Put those 2 jack frames on the subframe. I'm going to scoot under there and again look for any sort of coolant that escaped out of those head gaskets. You can kind of see that residue from burnt coolant around underneath those exhaust manifolds, as well as anything else. There was signs of somebody else having done some amateur work on the vehicle, or a mechanic who was pretty careless, where those bushings underneath the radiator, one of them was twisted completely sideways and not really supporting the radiator how it's supposed to. And we also had an AC compressor just dumping out gas out of the AC bottom of the AC compressor. It looks like a ton of that green oil that comes out of those. So a few signs of weird stuff, but no coolant, so that was a good sign as well. And we're going to go ahead and drain the cooling system. Alright, I know I mentioned checking that auxiliary hose to the overflow. At some point right here I blew through that just to check for blockage. There you go. And it was not blocked at all, as well as that little passage going to the radiator. I've actually bought a new radiator with those that are stopped up. That's what I was explaining here, where there was no hole. I had to poke one through with a pick, so that could be an issue as well. But in this case, it was just fine. Like I mentioned though, the radiator might have been new, so I just wanted to double check that. Alright, so here we're just carefully taking those hoses off. There's actually a little plastic elbow, a 90-degree turn right here that my left hand is on, and that's made out of plastic so that those rubber hoses don't have to go through such a hard turn and get brittle over time. We're just going to go ahead and take this top hose off, and at this point I'm going to go ahead and start inspecting the system for any sort of stop leak that may have been put in there that can cause cloggage in the radiator, get it clogged up, and that can cause pretty similar issues with what we've been experiencing here. In fact, there's kind of a general idea that quote-unquote weird overheating issues are associated with clogged radiators, so just something to look for. And as we pull this hose off, I can tell it's an OE hose just because it's so old, and so as I pull that off, I'm going to look inside that hose for any sort of stop leak. You know, that really gunky stuff that they put in there that may be stuck to the inside of any of these hoses. As I pull this one up, it looks just fine and clean on the inside, so that's a great sign there was no stop leak in here. There's a few other signs that there was no stop leak used, and I'll show you those in a second. Alright, so there's this cool little piece there that actually keeps any overflowing coolant from dripping on the alternator. That's how my ear got oily. I was wondering that after I got done. And oh, there's the new thermostat, just showing you that, kind of how that is built into its housing and comes up, but we'll worry about that in a second. We'll just get this top hose loose. Alright, so here we are. We're just going to take this elbow off I was talking about. Another great place to look for stop leak stuff that a chemical flush isn't going to get to quickly enough is behind the little lips here on the radiator on stuff. I know this one's old and the radiator may be new again because that thing was, the bushing on the bottom was changed, but there on the lip you can see it's dirty, but that's not stop leak, that's just dirt over time. So that's a good sign as well that stop leak wasn't put in there, and we can proceed with checking everything else out. I'm still going to check and see if that radiator is clogged with an inspection camera if I can get it in there. Okay, awesome little inspection camera here. I've been using, all the links for my tools are in the description down below. And this one actually has a camera that comes out of the side and straight out of the front, so you can change it. And I'm looking there, you can see, you'll see just a second on the screen here, I'll show you that none of those fins are clogged up at all. Hard to see, but that's super clean there, so that's a great sign. Gave me a ton of hope there. I was pretty excited that everything looked just that clean, and we're going to go ahead and proceed with changing the thermostat. Again, my concern is that there's air in the system, but we'll just get this taken care of and cover all the bases at once here since we've got to this point in the diagnosis. Alright, just to get to this thermostat housing a little bit easier, I'm going to take this reservoir off. Actually made a super funny sound on this little retaining clip there. When I pulled it out, I wish you could have heard it. That's what I was laughing about right there. And we're going to go ahead now. We have access to that thermostat housing, and we'll have audio in a couple of videos here for just a second because I forgot to turn the microphone on. Actually, one last thing to note, I was just laughing about as I was trying to take out this VVT solenoid, which was blocking the thermostat housing. It doesn't come out because the thermostat housing is in the way, but you can get the bolt off of the thermostat housing without removing the VVT solenoid. Luckily, you can undo the bolt on it and twist it so that connector you can see right there isn't blocking that bolt, and you have just enough room to get the thermostat housing out, and then you can get the VVT solenoid out. So it's a little bit of a puzzle there and a little bit of a weird design. Alright, I think this may be the last thing before we get audio for a couple of clips. I was just noting here that the bolts look pretty normal for a thermostat housing and water pump, kind of where some water seeps out and rust those up, but we're going to reuse those. They look alright and just pretty common, what you'd expect. Well, first try is going to be with it loose, see if that just can make it past it with the water pump, the thermostat loose. It would be easier if the water pump was easy to replace. I would just do it, you know what I mean? But these are timing chains, even though I probably wouldn't have to disalign the, well, I say that, I probably would have to take off the cam sprockets, misalign everything, re-put it back together, get it one tooth off. And no way, that's gonna have to come out. Must have forgot that little detail. Okay, oh, goodness. Let me get the magnetic socket. I'm not going to deal with this. Somebody just asked me the other day if I ever use magnetic sockets. I was like, not really. Look at me using a magnetic socket. The good thing is I have them when I need them, right? Problem is, they don't always work exactly like you'd expect. Like that. Pull it out. Bolt stays behind anyways. So I can twist it so I can actually screw the thermostat screw on this side back in. But we'll just sit this in here for now so it doesn't fall out. Break, get dirty. There we go. Round 3. Let me just undo this connector. I don't want to do the connector. Okay, round 3. Let's see if I can do this. Just get it beside the paper towel there. Well, close. Just come through a little. Something like this, basically, if I could just. Like that, that's good enough to get those two in. The other one I can reach easy. Just probably keeping that gasket on there. As long as you can keep 2 bolts in there, you're good. Okay. But it's gonna have to be jiggled around this. Silicone paste on that. It's just making a headache for nothing. What? Why is this not going in? Okay. So that should be in. I'm going to use this inspection camera again though. Man, maybe I'll just keep this thing out. Because if I don't have it, I just do a lot of guesswork, I've just realized. Seriously, not trying to sell this thing now. I don't care if you get one or not, but I like it. Now I can see, make sure that my gasket is on the bolts that it's supposed to be. You can see there, it is not. I thought it was, so it would have been a bad guess. Alright, well there you go. I think it took about 40 minutes to get that thermostat housing back in place. It was pretty tricky with its gasket, but I finally got it, and we're going back together now, ready to bleed this system. Alright, here we're just going to set up this coolant funnel. I got everything reconnected, no sense in showing all that with no audio. So we're just going to put this funnel on there with its little extender. Probably doesn't need to be up that high, but being up that high is not going to hurt anything. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So at this point, I had an idea of exactly how much coolant the system needed to take. Obviously, there may be a little bit still stuck around down there, so it might not take quite so much. But gives me a good idea of exactly how close we were getting. And top this off, watch all the bubbles come up. It's going to take, and now that I know, it took about an hour and a half to completely bleed it, but you know, I was willing to just be out there and start the car, turn it off, rev it up, do whatever needed to be done to get that air out of there. You can see here those bubbles are just chugging up, so we're just going to go ahead and finish topping this off. Alright, at this point here, I'm just verifying that the coolant temperature sensor is working. I'm actually massaging the upper hose there just to get the air out, but it would eventually work its way out by itself, just kind of trying to hurry it along. I'm confirming the coolant temperature sensor is working by checking with that little infrared thermometer there just to be sure everything looks great, and it appears that the water's starting to circulate as it is starting to get warm in the thermostat housing itself while I shut the car off, and then when I start the car again it cools back down. And right here, I think there's one of those beetles that bites you and itches really bad. Could be, there's two beetles that look exactly alike. I think that's the one that hurts though. Right here again, I really just wanted to take a moment to thank everybody who donated. Again, if you can, it seriously helps out so much right now in this stage of life, and just doing what we're trying to do, keeping these videos coming, because it's really hard to get these out. But I'll still do it regardless. If you appreciate it, consider donating, or if you want to help projects out like this, or again, just help me take my wife to dinner. It'll help out a ton. And a subscribe, you know. In reality, I appreciate all the support so much in the channel members. We'll keep going here, but man, this diagnosis is almost done, and I'm excited to show you what happens. I'm just showing you my little setup. I've got my scan tool up there monitoring the live data and the temperature. As you can see that coolant funnel up there, it just continuously over about an hour let out bubbles slowly. And so at one point I was worried if that would be, you know, a head gasket leaking gas or not, and I'll tell you how I determined it was not. Basically, the most important thing is every time bubbles came up, the fluid would drop. If it was gas from the head gasket, the fluid level would stay the same and you'd still have bubbles coming up. And there wasn't anything that ever overflowed in the overflow and made anything dirty. Again, that fluid level dropping was a real good indicator that it was actually drinking fluid and not just spitting out combustible gases through the head gasket. Alright, one more time here. I'm just verifying that that thermostat's opening up. It looks great. And there's a comparison. Alright, it's been about 45 minutes to an hour. You can see here the fluid starts to rise. It's starting to overheat because throughout the process I would turn it off, let it cool down, run the fans, turn it back on just to try and work all those bubbles out of there. And at some point everything's going to start to boil. As that happens, the gas is vaporizing there, and it's actually really good for the system to bleed. If you have this funnel on here, you'll see the fluid starting to rise up, and I got to run it, shut it off real quick. I thought maybe I didn't get it on camera, but I left it running on accident. Basically, as those gases vaporize and then cool back down, they let basically all that air out of the engine. When they cool back down, that space is collapsed upon by the fluid, and that was actually the last step in bleeding this engine. No more gas came up after that, no more air, and we'll see if it's overheating after that or not. Here it goes. Watch, you'll see me realize it's starting to raise a little bit there, starting to boil. Maybe right here. Oop, there it goes. Shut it off. You can see it boiling. That's that air in there vaporizing. You can see the bubbles coming up, and then it's going to drink it down real fast. As soon as it starts to cool down, get that scan tool out of there. Don't want it getting splashed. And there it goes, sucking it back down as those air pockets cool down. Pretty cool to watch that. I didn't think I got it on camera. That was awesome. Alright, so I'm just verifying everything on the scan tool there. You can actually see how much that dropped down, about another 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch in that funnel whenever the fluid got sucked back down that last time. I started it up a few more times. No more air was coming out of it, so I said let's leave this thing running for a while and see if it overheats, since last time it overheated while it was sitting, and then we'll take it on a test drive later. Just confirming all the data here on the scan tool before we take off. Alright, so I got that funnel out of there, drained the extra fluid into a water bottle. You'll see me pull out right there, keep it off the ground. and I was actually inside at this point for about 40 minutes monitoring the live data on my scan tool since it's Bluetooth and getting some work done inside. It was real hot outside. Actually, there's a ton of smog in the air from the wildfires in California and Oregon, so I wasn't outside a few days this week because of that, but just kind of getting some work done today, taking it easy, trying not to breathe too hard. So we're going to go ahead and put everything back together. There's the radiator cap, and I guess it was after this point I let it run that long, so I'll be inside right after this for about 40 minutes monitoring that data. Insert the notorious jack standing jack sliding across the ground sounds here. Everybody knows what those sounds like. If you ever heard them, you'll never forget it. Let that down. Again, at this point I had been inside for about 40 minutes while this ran at perfect temperature with no issues. And so that's awesome. We'll let it down. And then we're going to take it on a test drive here in just a minute. But so far we have not had any overheating. About an hour and a half of running sitting still, and that's the only time it overheated before. So I'm starting to feel very confident that we've got this problem taken care of. Who knows what I said here, but if you put up with the video this long with bad audio, thanks for watching. I hope that it was enjoyable to you. We'll finish out this video in just a second. I'll show you a couple more clips. But man, thank you for making it this far in the video. This one's a weird one. Alright, so again, just talking here about how it's not overheating. It's been running for a little bit longer, looking at all that data. You can see how much I pause when I'm trying to think. Now that I'm not going to cut this video, it's just a voiceover. But again, thanks for everybody for watching and supporting these things. And, you know, subscribe means a ton. So I love the community. I can't believe it's grown so big. And I try to interact with every single one of you who leaves a comment. So leave a comment down below. And thanks for visiting the channel. Okay, there you can see, no joke, it's been running forever. And that temperature's looking awesome. Still running there. That's what I said. A job well done right there. Anyways, that's it for real now. Everything buttoned up nicely. We took it on a test drive and nothing's overheating. We've got this job taken care of. We saved this customer her car from going to the junkyard. That really is a job well done. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks so much for watching.